psychologists have been telling us for well over 100 years now something very important, something I think we all feel in our hearts to be true, that we are literally born for each other, that from the moment we enter into this world, from the moment we leave our mother's birth canals, we come out longing for a sense of belonging, a sense of connection, to be with each other. That of all the things in this world that motivate us, what motivates us most of all is our desire to connect with one another. Now, neuroscientists agree. These scholars of the human brain have said our brains are uniquely wired for relationship. That in fact, the way our brains work, the way our neural networks are built, is that they light up when we find ourselves in a relational matrix. When we find ourselves very much connected to one another. Anthropologists get into the conversation as well. They say, listen, we humans, we've been here on this planet for 200,000 years. And for almost the entirety of these 200,000 years we've lived here, we have lived in villages. And villages have been settings that are uniquely designed to meet our base need for relationship, for each other. That being born in a village means being born into a world where 40 pairs of eyes greet you, where 40 hands are here to hold you and guide you through your life. Being born in a village means that you have a sense of welcome into this world, a sense of welcome that has you feel that you have a place, that you belong in the circle of life. And from that, you very quickly feel a sense of your worth. These villages have relationships so much at the center of who they are, that when one person in a village experiences a loss, the entire village would stop what they were doing for days at a time to sit with this person who's experienced the loss, to sit with them and be a safe container into which all their grief could pour out. If you or I had suffered a loss in the village, we would find ourselves surrounded for days by our fellow villagers, allowing us to let it all out, to not have to hold it in, that all of who we are, our grief as well, is welcome here. But you and I were not born into a village. You and I were born into something very different, because beginning about a few thousand years ago and accelerating a few hundred years ago was a monoculture, a singular culture that slowly overtook the villages of the world and has evolved to become today's consumer culture. I call that the marketplace in contrast to the village. So we are born in this very strange moment in human history, very distinct from how humans live for almost all of our time on this planet. And here we are born into the marketplace. Now the marketplace, interestingly, is diametrically opposed or very opposite to the village. In the village, we learn that we get through life together. In the marketplace, we're told that we must survive on our own. And the way we do that is by working hard to create our own wealth and then protecting that wealth from other people. Whereas in the village, things are shared, they're communal, and there's a sense of we're going to survive this life and we're going to enjoy this life together. So the marketplace leaves us very much alone, very much isolated, very incongruent with our very nature, the nature that psychology and neuroscience tells us we're built for. In addition to being isolated in the marketplace, when we grow up in the marketplace and as we begin to live our lives in the marketplace, we find that we have to live our lives very much doing all the acts of life on our own. We have to cook alone oftentimes and clean alone, and we often work alone, and there's this sense that we must live our lives and take up all the chores of living all by ourselves. Well, we were never meant to do all these things all alone. So of course it's exhausting for us to take care of all the tasks that come with living in this world all by ourselves, or if we're lucky, maybe with one or two other people. So we end up in this culture both isolated and exhausted. And we almost all of us feel that way so much of the time. Now, let me talk a little bit more about what happens when we grow up in a marketplace culture. Now look, in a village, we would be greeted by 40 pairs of eyes. But in the marketplace culture, when we're born, we're greeted by one pair of eyes, maybe two pairs of eyes, those being the eyes of our parents. Now they themselves feel isolated and exhausted, having had to live their lives in this culture. And they themselves have had grief and loss and trauma happen to them, where there was no village to come and allow them to express and release all of that. So they have all these traumas and losses and sorrows stuck inside of them, trapped inside of them. And so here we are, born into this world with these two people who I have no doubt love us as best they know how, but who themselves are compromised by having had to live in a consumer culture in the marketplace. And so what happens then is there's no way these one or two people could possibly meet all of our relational needs. There's no way these one or two people can possibly attune to all of our emotional needs. Perhaps, for example, they have a hard time with sadness. And when we get sad, they say, "Stop your crying or I'll really give you something to cry about." Perhaps they have a hard time with anger. And when we get angry, they get rageful in response. And we learn as small children very quickly what parts of ourselves our parents can make room for, and what parts of ourselves our parents seem unable to tolerate. And what we do then is we take the parts of ourselves that we feel aren't wanted, and we push them to the outer edges of our inner worlds. And we hold on closely to the parts of ourselves that we think will make us good boys or good girls and allow us to earn our parents' love. Now all of a sudden we're trying to get through life with only the parts of ourselves we think are good, while rejecting the parts of ourselves that we have decided are unlovable. It's a very, very hard way to live, with only parts of yourself available to you. So what happens from here? Well, so here we are in this world, very much trying to find our way with only these parts of ourselves available to us. And the culture comes along and it says, you know what? I'm going to show you how you can earn your sense of worth again. Because when we have to reject parts of ourselves, we feel ashamed about a part of who we are. So when we're young children, the culture exposes us. If you were a young child in the early 2000s, you'd have been exposed to about 40,000 advertisements on television in a given year. Now, what's interesting about advertisements in little children or young children is that small children can't distinguish between the authoritative nature of their school teacher, of their parents, and of the person on TV telling them in an ad what's happening. And so what do these ads tell children? They tell children this: look, if you just have the right stuff, people will want to be with you again. If you just have the right stuff, once again, you can feel your sense of worth. If you have the right frisbee, your parents will go out and play with you again. If you have the right video game, your friends from school will come over and want to be with you. And once again, you can feel a sense of belonging and place and feel your own sense of worth again if you just have the good stuff. Now, that's one message, and that hooks us into a lifetime of consumption. The other message the marketplace sells us on is this one: if you just get really good grades, your teachers will be proud of you. If you do really well on the soccer field, scoring lots of goals, your coaches will be proud of you. You can earn your way back into a sense of well-being by accomplishing enough, by producing enough. And this has us growing up believing that if we can just earn enough money, if we can just have a prestigious enough job, then people will notice. If we can just become famous enough, then people will notice us, they'll see us, they'll want to be with us, and then we'll feel our sense of worth again. But none of these things work. We can't consume our way into feeling our sense of worth again. into recreating relationships that we long for. And we can't produce our way into feeling our sense of worth again and into recreating the relationships we long for. These are destined to fail. We know this to be true. We have all the data that says it. Consider, for example, the data on wealth and well-being. If you look at emotional well-being versus wealth, the more money you have, your emotional well-being goes up until you get to the poverty line. And once you get a little bit past the poverty line, it doesn't matter how much more money you have, your sense of emotional well-being doesn't improve. Of course it doesn't, because our emotional well-being, our sense of well-being in the world, is shaped by the quality of the relationships we have with ourselves and with the people around us. It's not determined by what we have and what we accomplish, despite the culture's promise that it will be. But most of us spend much of our time hoping at some level, often subconsciously, that if I just have the right stuff, that if I just get enough money, if I just get enough popularity, then I will be loved again. But it's all misguided. And this is what this work is all about. The idea of how do we do the work within ourselves on the one hand, so that we can welcome back all the parts of who we are, including the parts we had to push away at an early age, so that we can live our lives from the fullness of all of who we are. But equally importantly, how do we recreate the villages of long ago? How do we create subcultures within the larger culture? How do we create intentional communities that have come together with the intention of recreating the relational richness that's been lost, so that we can know ourselves in the context and richness of genuine relationship with each other, recreating the feelings of belonging that we were born to experience, that we experienced for almost all of our time on this planet until the very recent bit of history. And this is the journey I want to invite you to join me on. Join me in this process of discovery of how we take the time to break the cultural norm of getting lost in the busyness of life and instead begin to make room for all of who we are on the inside and for a circle of people around us that give us a sense of belonging and worth in this world of ours. So come join me in this journey. You are very, very welcome here. Okay.